Thank you for joining our Enterprise Content Management Best Practice Series webinar. I'm Becky Melody, your hostess for today's presentation. Hector Trestini, Director of eRegulatory Affairs for Extito, will be presenting. The discussion today will cover introductions, webinar logistics, direction for post-webinar collaboration, and our discussion topic, how to optimize eRegulatory business processes through technology integration for the life sciences. We're pleased to have Hector Trestini as our featured speaker today. U.S. Data Management enjoys a solid partnership with Extito, who is a world leader in eRegulatory solutions for the pharmaceutical, medical device, and crop science industries. Hector is a former manager for the U.S. Vaccine Regulatory Affairs Operations team, the team at Sanofi Pasteur, where he managed the assembly, publication, and review cycles of individual content components, as well as managing the publishing and submission of compiled license dossiers. UsDM is focused exclusively on the life science domain. We're the market leader in providing IT, quality and regulatory compliance professional service solutions, and we have multiple various practices which are dedicated, again, exclusively to life sciences, but those practices include IT and virtualization, quality and auditing, ECM, ERP, PLM, enterprise quality management, manufacturing automation and equipment, clinical and drug safety, nutraceuticals, business intelligence, project management, governance, risk, and compliance, and our laboratory practice, which includes both systems and equipment. We're headquartered in Ventura, California, and we've delivered more than 1,000 successful projects with over 130 life science clients. We offer hands-on experience assisting clients who are under regulatory distress, and we're the market leader for validation accelerator packs. The content will be covered today in approximately 30 minutes, and then we'll invite you to post questions for the team via the iLink message board, which is on the lower left of your screen. Or you can join our discussion following the presentation on LinkedIn, and you can post any feedback and questions there. If your question is of a confidential nature, of course we can address that offline. We do appreciate you taking the time to join us today, and with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Hector.
Thank you, Becky, and hello, everybody. Thanks for attending today. In the next few minutes, I'll be talking to you about how technology can be leveraged to enhance and optimize the complex and business-critical regulatory submissions landscape. As Becky mentioned, please feel free to submit your questions during the presentation. Every question will be collected, and we'll try to answer them at the end of the webinar. So let's begin. It is clear that competition is driving changes and innovation in this industry. This is creating a lot of complexity for a lot of the sponsors that are planning and submitting submissions to the health authorities. Regulatory agencies are also requiring more and more information to be provided during the license approval life cycles. This is putting a lot of risk in the amount of information that needs to be created for regulatory submissions. And as more companies leverage the services of third-party vendors, preparing and organizing this content is increasingly becoming very difficult to coordinate to ensure that the content that you're generating meets the expectations of the regulatory agencies. Timelines for the submissions are being shortened while the number of these submissions continues to increase. So being able to compile and submit information to the authorities on time at a constant pace is now a major requirement. This is why there's a real need for better planning and coordination of information in project management among all the stakeholders in the industry. Besides the complexity that exists in the industry, we also have business domain complexity inside every organization that is involved in the publication and submission of regulatory dossiers. As you know, there are many business areas that get involved in the development of content that needs to be included in submissions. Most of these business areas have their own set of processes and procedures related to the life cycle of in management of content that needs to be included in the dossiers. They all use different technologies, typically not integrated, have different rule sets for each one of these components. Regulatory Affairs Operations is responsible for the assembly and publishing of compiled submissions and are usually involved very late in the planning and project schedules. On top of all this, the business processes related to the development of regulatory submissions is also complex and usually not well coordinated. We all know the content is created and stored in individual areas, including laptops and desktops. Most content needs to be reformatted in order to meet the regulatory requirements and the guidelines that have been published by the agencies. The cross-reference and bookmarking of these documents need to be done, and again, it usually happens at the end of the schedules, putting timelines at risk. Minor changes to content source and formatting requires republishing of a submission, especially those changes that get identified at the end and the QC has not yet been completed because this content needs to be republished. But all of this complexity can be minimized and controlled by implementing an integrated business process environment that is technology supported and compliance driven. The major building blocks of this capability are depicted here, starting with document management. These systems provide the functionality that allows organizations to coordinate an end-to-end life cycle of the regulatory documents. That includes workflows, the ability to integrate templates, capture metadata information about the objects that are stored, and putting a control mechanism to ensure the security is intact and that documents are not modified once they have been submitted to the authorities. Dossier publishing applications provide the automated functionality to help you compile, format, and validate regulatory dossiers, and also manage the life cycle of the submissions. Planning and tracking tools allow for the capture, reporting, and proactive management of the regulatory projects. So what I'm showing you here is our view of integrated processes that are helping organizations achieve coordinated project schedules, uniformity of source and submission content, flexibility and expedited compilation of regulatory submission data, quality and compliant dossiers and related records, as well as the proactive reporting of project tasks and milestones throughout the life of your applications. A key component of the regulatory technology landscape obviously has to be the DMS. This capability, when configured and used properly, can provide significant benefits to organizations. So implement the DMS as your central repository of your regulatory content. Deploy authoring templates that can be automatically applied as users select the type of document they want to create in the system. Develop business rules that control the type of source material being created, and implement versioning processes. Implement metadata management to assign the appropriate content attributes to the files when created. This will ensure consistency of the information. And leverage automated workflows for content review and approval, making sure that your internal policies for quality and control can be achieved. Once again, ensure your validation strategy includes the steps to capture, qualify, and manage the appropriate features to be deployed so that implementation schedules can be met. I think it's important to leverage the expertise of compliance organizations such as UsDM, who know DMS technology deeply, its uses and potential risks, in order to kickstart your DMS technology implementation projects. The most time-consuming and complex of the regulatory submission business processes is, of course, content creation. Here's an example of how a DMS can help you automate the major activities around the development of regulatory information throughout the enterprise. It allows you to create templates where you can deploy specific pre-formatted content formats to the various business domains, all sharing a centralized system to develop and submit their individual content components to the operational areas. You can deploy in DMS standard file naming conventions, as well as create and deploy standard tools that the authors can use, not just Microsoft Word based tools, but also PDF rendering technology. And you can also implement common folder structures and as well as metadata attributes that apply to each one of your regulatory content areas. A good way to implement your DMS is to leverage the DIA EDM model in order to come up with the right set of attributes that you should apply to each one of your content pieces. The next major business process that can be enhanced with technology is dossier publishing. As I mentioned earlier, typically publishing takes place very late in project schedules, so applying automation will significantly reduce operational risk and minimize your timelines for submission. You can implement a tool that integrates with a DMS to link your source content to the appropriate regulatory sections of a submission. You can use a publishing tool to help you reuse this content in multiple applications. It'll let you leverage functionality that allows publishers to automatically identify and use content. Within a dossier publishing tool, you can create templates that reflect the appropriate regulatory structures for quick reuse. And these tools should provide the ability to let you compile and submit not just electronic submissions, but also paper-based dossiers, and ensure proper validation rules are used based on submission types and meet the requirements of the regional authorities. Here's an example how a publishing tool and the DMS can provide integrated functionality to ease the submission assembly and publishing work tasks. starting with integrating the DMS so that your content is mapped to the appropriate regulatory structures. You can leverage your publishing tool to create document cross-references. You can actually also reuse this particular content in multiple applications at the same time and being able to identify where a document is being used. You can create approval-based workflows in your environment so that the stakeholders have the ability to review and QC the submission as it's being compiled. And they can then review features of the submission, such as hyperlinks, to ensure that they work properly. And you can have the publishing tool build the output that is required by the particular regulatory agency. Here's another example of what you can do with an integrated DMS and submission publishing tool, where you can select a document that is currently stored in the DMS, drag and drop that particular document into the appropriate structure in the publishing tool. The publishing tool also captures the metadata values assigned to the particular document object in the DMS. And the publishing tool also will be able to recognize, as new versions of the documents get created in the DMS, for use in the lifecycle management of the information that gets provided to the authorities. The end-to-end business processes can be planned and tracked using a technology-based approach for the proactive identification, classification, and monitoring of submission tasks across the business lines. Implementing a tool that allows the management of all regulatory activities is becoming critical in the industry. It is good to know not just when projects begin, but also being able to capture what content is going to be provided as part of that submission, and having a proactive way to identify the status of the individual pieces of information or content material, including current and planned changes to such content throughout the life cycle of the application. You should also employ automated workflows to route and track the work required to manage each submission project, and use it to communicate throughout the project schedules to ensure that all the stakeholders have a way to view, understand, and meet the individual commitments. Here you can see how an integrated registration tracking database system can be used to compile and monitor information that is coming from the individual business lines, and they can profit from the same platform by even monitoring the individual pieces in their environment, but also they can view the status of where the submissions in the particular content areas have done throughout the life of that particular application. Another often overlooked process area is records management. Continued compliance monitoring and enforcement actions from health authorities have really created the need to automate this process in a controlled and easily reportable way. The best way to achieve an integrated records keeping culture in the organization is to implement functionality to support the capture and tracking of all information across business areas, develop an automated business rules that control the type of source material being stored, including appropriate access levels, And then you have reporting functionality across business domain data to make sure that the appropriate people have access to the appropriate content in the organization, and that you have a way to audit this information at any time as required by internal policies or through an audit process. Develop appropriate processes for ensuring records are managed throughout the product life cycles, and include retention and destruction schedules in the overall strategy. And I've seen a lot of times records are kept for more than it is required by the organizations. So internal policies typically do not get vetted throughout the organization to ensure that the compliance requirements are met across the individual business units. Even though some records, for all terms and purposes, needs to be kept forever, there are other related information that should not be kept for a long time. You know, those policies should exist at each one of the organizations, and the records management system will allow you to implement those rules to ensure that the content is managed throughout its life cycle. So as you can, hopefully you have seen here in the last few minutes, technology can really provide significant business value across the major business process areas involved in the regulatory submission landscape. But deploying technology needs to be planned and vetted throughout the organization thoroughly to minimize this complex environment. You should involve key stakeholders when identifying opportunities for automation in your companies, and develop your plans with the help of experts such as UsDM, and implement changes carefully while monitoring progress. This will help you ensure that the technology is meeting the business requirements and that your business processes are being optimized by leveraging the appropriate technology in the appropriate functionality to support every aspect of the submission process environment. I want to say thanks to all of you for your time today. Feel free to ask any questions. Hopefully you have found this to be helpful in giving you some ideas to consider in your environment. And with that, I'm going to send it back to Becky.
Thank you so much, Hector. Appreciate you sharing that information with us. We do have a few questions coming in, and while the rest of you are typing in your questions, I would like to remind you that the session has been recorded and will be available on our website, which is, of course, usdatamanagement.com. While you're there on the site, you can see our notices of future webinar presentations, as well as a list of the previously recorded presentations that may be useful for you or your team members as well. Let's see, our first question for Hector is from Rhonda, and she wants to know, what are the biggest hurdles to moving from outsourcing your submission to moving it in-house?
Making sure that I understand the question is, this is moving submissions from outside company back internally?
Yes, I believe that's right.
Okay. I think the biggest risk that needs to be identified and managed at the beginning of such a project is validating those submissions before you bring and import those submissions into your publishing tool. It is important to identify the potential errors that these submissions will generate in your environment, and for you to plan and have a documented strategy on how you're going to be dealing with those records. It's good to be proactive at the beginning, because I can almost guarantee you that depending on the timing and the tools used by that external organization to compile those records will generate some kind of an error in a different tool. So manage that risk, develop your strategy for validation, and then put a process in place that helps you identify what needs to be changed, how, and who needs to be involved for making changes prior to using or importing those particular submissions into your publishing tool.
Very good, thank you. Our next question is from Frank, and he would like to know, what document management systems does your solution support?
Extido, the name of our product is EC3 Manager. Extido supports all of the major document management systems. That includes applications built by Master Control, NextDocs, Microsoft SharePoint, Documentum, OpenText, IBM, etc.
Very good. Thank you, Hector. Okay, and a question here from Venkat. He's asking, does your solution support the new XEV MPD standard? And Hector, we're trusting that you know what that is. I certainly don't.
I do, thanks. Yes, Extido also has a product called MPD Manager that will allow organizations to capture, assemble, and submit this information to the European agencies. If you're interested in learning more about it, just let us know, and we'll get back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Hector. All righty. Thank you so much, everybody. It looks like that's our final question there. And again, we do invite you all to join the discussion on our LinkedIn. There's a USDM group page. Please join us there and offer your insight. We welcome feedback and suggestions. And we'd also like to know if you have a preference for a future topic, if there's something that you're struggling with that you'd like to hear from Extido on, or a pain point USDM can address around compliance. Certainly do let us know. If you enjoyed the information shared, please take a moment and click the like button there on the LinkedIn. And better yet, take a moment and give us a comment. We sure appreciate your feedback. Our management team is looking at that particular site as a basis for determining whether or not to continue to fund our complimentary webinar presentation series. And we'd like to continue sharing solid information with you. So please take a moment there. And thank you again, Hector, for presenting. Really good information for us all. And we appreciate our audience taking the time to join us. On behalf of the U.S. Data Management Team and Extido, we do appreciate the opportunity to team with you all towards excellence in compliance. Have a wonderful day.